little bit fast. This talk was originally a bit longer. What we're going to talk about today is free-to-play collectibles and collection loops. That's kind of my thing. Let's talk first about who I am. So, my name is Elad. You pronounce my name beautifully, by the way. Very, very, very rare that happens. I'm a senior game designer at Rovio. We made a little game called Angry Birds. Since then, we've made a lot of games called Angry Birds. And then I work in our Stockholm studio where we're focused on free-to-play RPGs. We manage Angry Birds 2, which today is really focused more about character collection, hat-based economy. Since we've added hats to the game, I think the ARPDAU is increased by about 400%. I take zero credit for that. I wasn't there when it started, but I do work a little bit of live ops on that. We also work on Angry Birds Evolution, which is a hero collection kind of game, and I'm working on some new RPGs. So, oh, and I just had a baby. So these past few nights have been the first full nights of sleep I've had in months. So excuse me if I'm a little bit still tired. Okay, click. Yes, what are we talking about today? Like I said, we're talking about free-to-play collection loops. And my hope is that after this talk, which is quite dense, like I said, I'm going to rapid fire it very soon, you will have a better idea of how to build how to build a collection that people can invest in and enjoy for years, really. Okay, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions. I really doubt it. What do we mean by collectibles? Well, I'm talking about the kind of items that you collect in the game and you use in the core game. So it can be cards in some games, it can be heroes, it can be equipment, it can be buildings in other games, any kind of thing where you collect and invest in it and you use it as part of your game experience. So not just resources, but these collectibles that are actually usable. Okay, I'm going to call them cards in the talk just because it's convenient. So here's a very simple collection loop. You play a game, you get some stuff, you upgrade it, you use it in the game, you get farther and farther the better your equipment, cards, whatever it is, are. And we're going to talk about all these things that tie mostly into the collection part of the loop, but of course the collection doesn't work without the upgrading and the playing. So we'll talk about those as well. And again, the hope is how do we get players collecting and enjoying for years? Hopefully you'll know something about it at the end of this talk. So let's get going. All right, mistake number one, making some cards too useful. Right, so the obvious way to make that mistake is to make an overpowered card or hero or anything like that. Naturally, if something is overpowered, much better than everything else, nobody wants anything other than the overpowered card. And if they have the overpowered card, they feel like, okay, I'm done, I got the thing that beats the game. That's not fun, having that kind of easy button. So obviously you fix that with game balancing. But there's a more sinister way of making this kind of mistake with balancing, and that's making the cards non-distinct from each other. In fact, you can have your cards in perfect harmony and perfect balance, but you don't really need a different variety of many cards. So maybe after one deck, you're done, and you're like, okay, I got this deck, it works, I've upgraded it to max, it kind of beats the game. Again, that misses the fun of what is an RPG. An RPG is fun because you collect, you upgrade, you get new stuff, you try out new combinations of things. So you don't want to create that kind of situation where a person builds one deck and then they feel like they're done. We had this problem in Angry Birds Evolution in the early days of the game. This is an example of a team that was, fairly good in the early days of the game. And pretty much if you had a team like this, you could go. We actually had whales in the game, which spent like $3,000 during soft launch. And then they were pretty much done, so they left. That's a fucking disaster. Sorry. That was like painful, because that's a person that could have been with us until today if we had the solutions for it and had paid more thousands of dollars every week throughout that time. So you want to create what we call collection diversity. So collection diversity is when I need to have a diverse collection of many different cards in order to beat the various challenges that the game is making me face, right? And we do this through our game rules. We don't do it through the collection itself, even though you can also do things like sets and stuff like that. We do it through game rules, and let's talk about 3 of those. So one way to enforce collection diversity in a way is a gate. So a gate is where you say, okay, only red birds can enter this dungeon, right? Well, suddenly you need a team of red birds. This is what we did in Evolution as kind of that hot fix to our problem of collection diversity in the early days. We added colored dungeons. Suddenly, instead of needing one team, you needed that one main team for PvP, but you also needed 5 different colored teams of the 5 different colors that we have to beat every colored dungeon. So already 5-fold of potential collection that you have in your game. Okay, the example here is from Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, which makes a really nice loop with this kind of thing, where they tell you, okay, to get the best healer gear, this is a simple example, you need a good agility team. This is the agility challenge, and only healers and supports can go into it. It's the other way around than what I said. Doesn't matter. And then for the healer gear, you need the tanks. And for the tanks, you need the agility guys. So, okay, I need to build a collection to get the best stuff for everyone. And then, of course, with events, they drive this even further, where they say, okay, this week's event, we're running a Sith team, right? And then the main reward for this event is going to be useful in the next event, and so on, and we keep the players engaged in such a way. The other way to do it is through boosts. Well, boosts is where I say, okay, you don't have to use anything. You use whatever the hell you like, but Redbirds get 10 times damage, 10 times points, score multiplier, whatever it is you want to use. And so, whoa, holy moly. And this is used pretty extensively in the example I give here, which is Legendary Game of Heroes. It's also used pretty well in Angry Birds too in some of our events. We use both gates and boosts. And so you might ask yourself, well, which one should I use, a gate or a boost? What's better? Well, honestly, I find that gates work best as a way of telling player very clearly this is what you need, and avoiding a lot of frustration. Because if you use a boost, especially in a single player event, if you say, well, Redbirds do 10 times damage, then probably you're balancing it around Redbirds. Someone could go in with Bluebirds and really bang their head against the wall and feel like, okay, well, this sucks. You don't want to create that situation. You want to create that situation where you say you have to be this tall to ride, you need this to enter, whatever it is, use a gate, it works, and nobody has any hard feelings, by the way. Sometimes I hear from developers, oh, it's so contrived, it's just a rule that I made up. Well, yeah, you're a game designer, you make up rules, it's okay. Players accept the rules of your game. Where would you use a boost? Well, chiefly you use boosts in places where you want the participation rate to be closest to 100% as you can get it. So multiplayer events, for example, leaderboard events, are a place where you wouldn't want to do a gate. Because in a multiplayer event, players are your content, right? You don't want to keep anybody out. You want everybody to come in there. And then players balance around themselves. They balance around the leaderboard. Somebody has a card that gives 10 times multiplayer, great. They are going to go higher up the leaderboard. The players that don't have it are going to be lower on the leaderboard, but that's going to work. And that's what Legendary do to really excellent levels. They do it there at Network. That's essentially it for gates and boosts. And of course, there is a much harder, but much more rewarding in a way to create collection diversity, which is through the metagame balance, right? So actually making each card distinctly useful against different challenges through counters, counter-counters. This guy is immune to freeze, this guy is immune to burn, this guy does this guy does that, is a great way to create collection diversity, but there's a lot of challenges to it. You're never gonna make it so every team is viable. And when we say metagame, by the way, I mean the strategies that players create around your game. Not metagame in the sense of those loops that we do, but the strategies that players create around the optimal way to play the game. This is an example from Overwatch, right? Ash and Bob meta, huge DPS changes. They added Ash to the game and suddenly things shifted. Why? Because everything you add to a live kind of game where you can build every team against every team, every hero against every hero, adds to that matrix of possible combinations. And so you create a more complex set of interactions. So this is hard to do, but obviously very rewarding. If you actually make it so a new hero is interesting and useful, that's where it's at. One thing I will mention about adding new cards and adding collection diversity is you really need to try and not devalue your old cards. And this is actually where I have a bit of criticism to Network and Legendary, because there's a situation there where, you know, during 1 week they tell you, okay, this event you need these guys that are featured in the gacha. They're the best thing in the world. Go chase them. You need them. You do all this effort during the event to get as far as you can in the event. Later, those cards are useless. It's like, okay, yeah, there's a new set of featured event cards, and the ones you just used, you're not really going to be using again. So when you do this, try to do it through things like counters, side grades, etc., and really loop back to older events. I think Monster Strike in Japan is a great example of a game that does this well, where they cycle through their events in a way that you really feel like the thing I'm collecting today is also going to be useful in 3 months. There's a sense that my collection is growing stronger and there's a value to my virtual property, right? And it's not being constantly devalued. It's really important. There's going to be a bit of power creep also, but that's inevitable in free-to-play. That was our first mistake, guys. How much time do we have? That was actually the longest one, though. Don't worry. So to summarize, don't make your cards too broadly useful. You need to encourage that diverse collection, and you do it through game rules. Whew. That was one, sorry. I am talking fast. It's annoying, isn't it? Lordy. Okay, so mistake number 2 is having no use for duplicates. Now, your economy needs duplicates. I'm not going to justify this too much. If your economy doesn't have, if you need to collect everything just once, that's a very capped economy, obviously. And when we create free-to-play, we want to create something that is sustainable for years, right? So let's just assume we need that. I'm going to run through this point a little bit. Now, so what you do is you say, okay, you can get every card multiple times, but when you get it the second time, there's a certain exchange value to it, right? And I would say there are 2 basic models of doing this in my space of the free-to-play RPGs, but there's different ways as well. One is the fusion model, and one is the token model. I'll talk about them in a moment, and also I'll talk about how it's very easy to screw them up, especially in the end game if you don't design them right. Okay, so a fusion model is where you say, okay, you can get multiples of the same card. This is a collaboration we did with Puzzles & Dragons. Puzzles & Dragons is, to my knowledge, the first fusion game I played. So in a fusion game, you can get 10 copies of the same hero, and you can feed one hero into another in order to sacrifice it and give XP to the other. So in theory, you could say, okay, every card I get here has value because even if I'm not using it, I can feed it to another for XP, right? It kind of works in the early game. It changes a bit in the end game. We'll talk about it in a moment. A token model is where you only have one of each card. And essentially, Clash Royale is a great example of this. You get the card once, and now you have it to use. You get the card 2 times, the second time, and then you upgrade it to level 2, etc., etc. It depends on the rarity. They do some shenanigans over there. But that's essentially what it means. You have one copy of each card. Also, all these token-based games, Heroes Charge, Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, Marvel Strike Force, all use a token model. So inherently, this model has a few more risks and relies much more on collection diversity. You're going to see in these kinds of games much more of these collection diversity features that say you have to use red birds, you have to use blue birds. Because the heroes aren't transferable, they don't tie into each other in a kind of meaningful way. So there's more risk of something being useless, essentially. So you really want to make it so everything is useful in some corner of the game, some ride of the game. Okay? But then let's talk about the end game for this as well. So the fusion model in end game, like I said, in theory, in a fusion game, you could say, okay, any card is useful because you can feed it into other cards, but you don't actually it's cards that you've spent hundreds of dollars in the gacha or days or whatever it is. You're not going to just feed them into another for a bit of XP. That's not what you do. So you need to either add situations where feeding a high-level card is extra useful. It gives something extra like a skill up. In Monster Strike, it increases your luck rating, things like that. Or you need to introduce these kinds of exchange systems. So Summoner's War, for example, has this exchange where they say, okay, get 4 max versions of this 4-star card to create this 5-star card, and 4 max versions of this 5-star card to get this insane 6-star card. And then, of course, you have a much longer runway to make any kind of card that the player collects useful. You want to make it so when you get a drop, you have some use for it, right? In the token model, the really thing you got to watch out for is what do you do when you max those tokens? So obviously, there's a max level. You don't go to infinity. And when you reach that max level, you need to add some kind of exchange currency. So Clash Royale gives you gold for cards beyond max. Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes gives you these tokens for the shard store. So essentially, there's a lower exchange rate where you say, okay, well, you got some of these tokens. You're already max. Here's some currency instead, which you can use to buy other tokens. And then recently, of course, there's been some more clever exchange systems in Clash Royale. Any kind of overflow currency. If you don't have this, you're really screwed. Like, honestly, because obviously you don't want a situation where somebody drops a card or a token and there's no use for it. Like we said, we don't want useless items. And you definitely don't want a situation where you remove things from the drop table when they're maxed. I know of a developer that I worked with that did this, and then it created this acceleration where every hero that the player maxed made it easier to max the next hero, and it just accelerated, accelerated, accelerated. Of course, their whales maxed out their collection very early. As soon as they realized it was a problem, I mean, they pulled the plug on that and they added some exchange currency and their player base was pissed. If you do this in live, it's like, okay, wait, what? You just took away a huge amount of value from the players. So really plan for it ahead of time. That's pretty much it for these models. How much time do I got? Ooh, man. Okay, I'm going to rush to the next. So don't forget to make duplicate cards useful. Make sure you plan for endgame, blah, 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 blah. Okay, mistake number 3, drops that are too random. Hey, let's not talk about loot boxes. Come on, that's boring. But listen, suffice to say, I've been doing free-to-play enough time to know that loot boxes aren't some kind of silver bullet. You know, it's not like people are going to get into a spending frenzy just because they're there. You know, you need to provide value, and people notice when there's no value in the gacha. If you make a 0.1% change in your gacha, your players are going to start complaining online and stuff like that. They notice. Okay, so they know where value is. And you want to give them the drops. You made this content. Why not give them the stuff that you worked hard for, right? So players are chasing certain things. We want to help them chase. And we do this through what we call safety nets. Okay, so safety nets are any kind of system that mitigates risk. In this case, the risk of a random spin. Okay, so here's some example safety nets. One is a hidden pity counter. Blizzard games famously use this. They say every 40th card pack that you open in Hearthstone, you're guaranteed a legendary, right? This number changes sometimes. Don't catch me on the number. Okay, there's also a visible pity counter. We use this in Angry Birds Evolution. We say, hey, during an event, every 5 spins you do, your chance of getting the event card increase. There's other ways of doing visible pity counters. That's great. That makes people feel like when they spin the gacha, oh, wait, we're here. Then they're getting value every time, right? Even if they didn't get the thing they wanted, they're progressing, right? There's also all these various guarantees on 10 spins and featured characters where you say, okay, today this character is featured, you have a much better chance of getting it. It's great for players who are chasing that specific thing. And then there's currency drops where you just say, okay, well, you didn't get the thing you wanted, but you get something that you can later use to exchange directly for the thing that you want. That's about helping in the gacha. Now, why do we still want gacha, though? One, I think it's fun. And I think in a game where there's need for collection diversity, it's fun to get new hooks of different characters and things that you think, oh, I can use this, I can try this out, right? You would get many more things in a gacha game than you would if you were buying things directly. Because you don't have that choice paralysis where, oh, do I want this, do I want that? No, you just get it as a gift. Okay? And the other benefit of gacha is it acts as a value anchor. Okay? People know that gacha is risky and it's not guaranteed, right? But that's the place where at least they have a good idea of saying like, okay, well, I know I usually get a 5-star hero every 100 spins or so. Then they see an offer that says, hey, why not just get this now for 10 bucks, 20 bucks, 30 bucks, whatever it is you're offering them. And they say, you know what, that's worth it to me. My time is worth something to me. That's great. We need to make money as well, right? So that's gacha as a value anchor. So don't make your gacha too scary. Really, it can be a nice thing and help players chase cards with safety nets. And mistake number 4 relates to this. Because a lot of players think it's about getting the drop rather than having the thing. And I'll explain what I mean by this. Basically, it's not about the moment of getting the thing, right? If you get an item and the most you can say is like, cool, now I have it, that's all right, but it's not great. What you want is a situation where getting a thing is like, oh, this is an exciting opportunity. Now I can use this. Now I can upgrade this. Right? You don't want this. If you did it the other way, one, you would have to make things super rare, which is annoying. People would chase them for years, and when they got them, they'd be like, okay, now I have it. So you don't want that situation. You want them to get it fairly early and easily, and then be able to use it and invest in it, right? But then, so we want to be generous, but how do we do it without hurting monetization? Well, here's the secret. It's not about the drop, it's about the upgrade, right? So I'll just give an example. I'll just rush ahead to the example. Here's an example in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. For a simple farmable character, it's kind of a trash character. Her name is Barriss Offee because Star Wars is stupid. And it takes about, in farming, you could unlock this character in like 3 days worth of stamina of just like farming this character. So you would have it. If you really wanted to, you could get it in an hour or spend a few gems or something like that to get it. That's 3 days. But then to max it, you don't have to read the whole table. There's a total here. To max it, it would be 131 days worth of stamina, 6.5 million gold, months of raids and events for those super rare skill items and stuff like that. And that's a simple farmable character. If it was an event character or a rare character, it would take even longer. So players can get the character. They can try it out. They can say, okay, cool, this is a cool character to have. But then, you know, the free-to-play people need to say, okay, I need to choose what I invest in. The whales can say, well, I want to max out everything. And that's, you know, how you make your money. And that's how you balance these things. How am I doing here?
I go about 1 minute.
Sick. Let's fucking do it. Okay, so I said the F word. I'm sorry. Forgot I'm in an English-speaking country. I think I mentioned this, but a deep meta game is really key. We want to make our games deep. We want to make it fun to collect things. And you want to see this kind of thing on YouTube where people say they strategize, they theory craft, stuff like that. And my one advice to you is don't confuse approachable with simple. right? Or simple, I said it the other way around on this one. But the point is, I work at Rovio, right? We make games for the whole family, mass market games. Give me a second here. And I think about this a lot. I think about how do I make games that everybody can enjoy? And my instinct as a designer is to say, oh, keep it simple, keep it stupid, right? But then it's not deep. Then they can't keep playing it for years because it's lame. It only has attack and defense. It doesn't have a million stats or whatever it is. So keep the depth there. Just you need to unfold the complexity over time in a way that is approachable to players. That's okay. It's hard, but that's why you're being paid to design games, supposedly, right? So you need to unfold the complexity, and I think Clash Royale is a great example because when you think of it, by the way, all the full version of this deck will be online, so you can cool your phone game. A single card in Clash Royale has probably, what, 40 stats, 45 stats. How much does it cost to put down on the field? How fast does it move? How fast does it attack? How many projectiles it fires? What does it target first? All that sort of thing. It's a deep game, but it's super approachable. It's super clear that a giant is a kind of guy who breaks down walls and moves slow and stuff like that, right? The visual design matches the function, and it's a very deep game, but it's very approachable. So give yourself that toolbox. Don't limit yourself, especially in the early days, especially before you've launched the game. Give yourself a variety of stats, a wealth of parameters to play with so you can make your game excellent. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.